Good morning. How are y'all doing? So, it's been a long time since I've been in front of anyone. I spend a lot of my time hiding in the shadows and such. Let's get here. Is anyone aware, or does anyone know what a blue dozen is? Right off the bat. I was asked this question a few years ago, sitting in a backyard with a buddy of mine around this time of morning, and we were having a daily coffee and smoke break, and he asks me, he's like, "Hey man, do you know what a blue dozen is?" I got no idea what that is. And he's like, "Well, my grandma was telling me about it. A blue dozen is a baker's dozen that's missing one." I was like, "All right, man, so a dozen." He's like, no, dude, it's a blue dozen. It's a baker's dozen that's missing one." I was like, "Cool, man." He's like, "Yeah, my grandma's crazy." I was like, "But hold on, do you know what that means?" That means like the only way for you to even be aware or know that something is a blue dozen is to know that you're missing out on something. Like, anytime that, anytime that people get a dozen of something, usually, you're pretty happy with it. A dozen donuts, a dozen eggs. But yeah, blue dozen, you're missing one. Anyway, I thought that was really significant at the time. I was like, man, that's how we see the world. He was like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, every day people drive around, they see billboards, they see advertisements, you see things and stuff that people want you to look at because they put it there for you to look at it. And you look at it and you go, "Oh, okay," and you keep going. I feel like when I'm driving around or when I'm out and about, I see the blank walls. Like, when I see something that's covered with stuff, like, my mind blocks it out. I find those blank spaces, and I immediately start, like, filling it with images. It hasn't always been like that. I mean, I've always been one to draw and create, but I haven't always been considered myself an artist, so to speak. In fact, years ago, I tried taking an art class in high school, and the teacher handed us 3 colors: red, blue, and yellow. These big tempera jugs. I'm sure y'all are all familiar with them. And she was like, "Make a color wheel and make it look real good." So I drew a little cartoony doodad, put a wheel, and I started to paint. And it looked terrible. Absolutely horrible, horrible, horrible. In fact, it's my first and only failing grade I ever got in any schooling at all, ever. And like, crushed me. I was like, what is going on? Ma'am, this drawing is clearly awesome. We're in art. It's a subjective thing. If you don't like my art, you can just say that you don't like my art. You don't have to give me a failing grade. She was like, "Well, Billy, I love your drawings." She goes, "This color wheel right here, all you've got is a blue, red, yellow, orange, green, purple, and then a bunch of browns and grays." And I was like, "I agree." She goes, "That's not how it's supposed to look." It turns out I'm colorblind. And so, at the time, it didn't really mean much, except for that failing grade. And you know, it prompted me to ask, like, what does that even mean? Like, why should I be faulted on this at all, you know? What is color anyway? Color is nothing but energy. Color is something that, like, it's a span of visible light that we're able to pick up on. It can be measured. There's, like, wavelengths, frequencies, you know, heights and stuff. Like, the shorter something is, it starts looking a certain way. The longer it gets, it starts looking a certain way. And it's like, we use these things, you know, like if you push that further in the spectrum, you get lasers and heat and other things that aren't even light or visible. If you push it the other way, it starts getting lower. You get X-rays, you get other radiations and down into frequencies of like audible things that you can hear. Like even this, you know, frequencies and stuff. Anyways, I feel like we use it for communication. It's all over, like even in nature all the time. We use color to sometimes camouflage ourselves. Sometimes dangerous things such as like a praying mantis, may camouflage itself as a pretty little flower. And so it can eat more bugs and such, right? We've got there's other animals that use color to warn, you know what I mean? Like instead of hiding, they're trying to let you know that they're there. Many of them are poisonous, such as the coral snake. If you ever see one, you know that it's a coral snake because that red meeting yellow means that it will kill a fellow. But you've also got animals that know that there are other animals that are not messed with. And so their colors take on something similar, just so they're not messed with, but they're completely harmless, such as the milk snake. Red meeting black, poison lack. If you ever see a snake and you have time to think of a rhyme to be my guest, you can use those. I tend to run when I see a snake. I figure it out later. Yeah, I feel like even people use these same techniques with color. We use it all the time when we're trying to blend into the crowd, camouflage, you know what I mean? Whether it's some military garb, or whether it's the latest designer, whether it's like the coolest whatever from wherever, so you can look just as cool as the other people look wherever you are, so you can fit in. We also use it, when back in the day, people would use tattoos and such to warn others of danger, right? And so way back in the day, if you ever saw someone covered in tattoos, you knew not to mess with that person, right? Well, like as years have gone by, some of us that are not quite as tough have picked up on this. And we realize that y'all don't mess with people that are covered in tattoos. So we cover ourselves in tattoos so that people leave us alone. Anyway, I'll just get back. And so, anyway, like, this is something that goes on. It's like reflected over and over and over again. And I've always found it really interesting. Back, I don't know, maybe 5-6 years ago, I went through one of those big, terrible, everything falls apart moments. I feel like everyone tends to go through them, whatever it may be. When I went through mine, I found myself with a lot of time on my hands. And I would sit around, and I just felt compelled to make. And like, even though I had been told that I was colorblind way back then, I had kind of tossed out the idea of ever even using color. Hadn't touched paint, hadn't touched any color making stuff. I always loved to draw, black and white, I'm all over it. But as far as like color, I just stayed away. When I went through that terrible thing, I started picking up the brush and I started trying it out. And people had always asked for little things and stuff, and so I figured I'd just, as long as I've got all this time, I'll go ahead and get to it. And at first I started off like painting the way that I feel most people start painting. Like you paint what you see, you paint what you know, you paint what you like to look at. So I would do flowers, birds, fish and stuff, and I would try my best at it, but usually was not completely happy with it, and I rarely cared about what the colors were. It was just out of this compulsion to make, you know what I mean? And so then as time went on, I began getting, I would get angry sometimes. And so when I started getting angry, I would color with things that hurt my eyes. It's almost like inflicting pain upon myself, hoping that it would inflict pain upon the viewer. But I don't know if it ever necessarily worked out that way. It hurt my eyes to paint this because the way the colors would shake for me was terrible. Blues on oranges, greens on pinks, pinks on greens. I would use these colors on purpose to instill the anxiety in the viewer that I was feeling at the time. Same thing when I would go and put stuff up on the walls. Sometimes those colors that I was using weren't weren't for a specific purpose. It was only for like to disrupt the eyes. Anyway, after that, I lost my anger. I wasn't quite as angry anymore. So I started to do more stuff in black and white all the time. And in fact, like I kind of got to a point to where I felt like things were meaningless to some extent, right? Life and all that. And so all my paintings just became this, just cluttering these spaces with as much just line work but empty color as I could. I just felt like it didn't matter how much I made or like how many things I drew, how much or how it looked, you know, it was meaningless. And it's like the same thing with some of these, and I don't like the style of it, I like the way it looks, but when I do it, the mindset is that it's all pointless. After that, I kind of went through a blue period, if you will. After feeling like things were meaningless, I was kind of sad and stuff, and so painted with a lot of blues, and I would work with these ideas of demons that we keep inside of us, or things of that nature. Anyways, I got past that too. And I've now gotten to a point to where I like to use color for like more specific purposes. Like I'm not quite as afraid of it anymore. I don't feel like things are quite as meaningless anymore. Now I've kind of gotten around to a point in my life where I feel like things have purpose if you give it that purpose, right? I know this is all kind of rambling. So even as far as that goes, like some of these more recent paintings where it's like I'm trying to focus on details and like actually what colors things may be, and maybe, I don't know. It's all work in progress, obviously. I feel like all of life is like a work in progress, right? It's something that we're constantly working on. I feel like anyone that ever feels like they have it probably doesn't. And those people that tell you that how to have it, they probably don't have it. You know what I mean? I feel like everyone makes everything up as they go all the time. And in fact, like way back in the day, there was this really cool guy named Bob Ross. And he would paint every day. And he would do these landscapes where you would watch him, and he would have happy clouds, and he would have happy little bushes, and he would have happy little accidents, and everything would just like look super, super groovy, super happy, so good. And I would sit there and try to paint with him. I would try to keep up with him. And then he would put like a big black mark on his painting. Like, it would be looking so good. And every single episode, Bob would put a big old smeary dark mark, like right in the middle of the piece. And like, even as a young kid, it would cause me like anxiety. I was like, Bob, what are you doing, Bob? Like, so I would change the channel. Like, I can't even watch this. You've ruined this painting, Bob. You usually do so well. I know they've given you a show. You totally ruined it today with this huge black mark. I would change the channel. I would always end up wrapping back around towards the end of the show to see, like, you know, how's he gonna get out of this one? And I would show up right at the end to see this like amazing painting, amazing piece. And I was like, what happened to the big dark mark? And it would turn out that like he had taken this dark mark and added in like some little highlights, a few low lights, maybe a couple little greens here, maybe a couple flowers there. And then he's got this bush or this shrubbery or this whatever it was, like in the middle of the piece, like way up in the front. And now this whole thing has depth. This whole thing has got character. This whole painting is way more exciting. And it's all because like he just kept going on this like terrible little dark mark. You know what I mean? And I feel like that's something that like we can all take with us like all the time, because like every day, right, of our life is like a huge painting, right? It's like a huge masterpiece that we're working on daily. Like each thing we do, it's a little brush stroke, how you want to color a conversation, how you want to color a day with your attitude or your interactions with people, because that's all this stuff is. It's just interactions, it's just energy, it's just measurable, like, stuff, you know what I mean? And it's like the way we interact with that is how we color ourselves all the time. And it's like we can have those big dark marks happen, and we can feel like, you know, just being done, like finishing painting, like kill the painting before it's over, you know what I mean? I know I've been there before, but it's like we've got to continue to paint and to add those little low lights, highlights, keep going, each little brush stroke, because like each one of those like will make us eventually more deep, more character filled, right? And so yeah, I want to charge y'all to go out and look at the world a little bit differently. Maybe think about this a little bit. When you're out and about and you see like a blank wall, or if you see a painting that someone like spent some time on or whatever, or how you want to color your own situations. And yeah.